Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deputy Kosha Hayden, and welcome to our episode 2 of Justice Talk, where it's just us talking. I'm one of the PIOs for the Sheriff's Office, and I want to start out by talking a little bit about myself. I've been here for 27 years. It seems a lot longer than that on some days, but just celebrated my 27th year with the Sheriff's Office, and it has really flown by. I have worked in every single division in the Sheriff's Office. I think the only unit that I haven't worked in is civil. And I definitely would like to work in civil sometime for sure. This is my second stint as PIO, and I'm really enjoying it. The technology part of it's a little bit different from old days when I was typing emails and answering phone calls and doing it the old-fashioned way. But before we move on to our topic for the day, I have to introduce two really great guys behind the scenes that really make this podcast work. We definitely couldn't do without them. Sergeant Jeff Miller and Deputy Jason Blanchard both work for the Community Resource Unit. They are the behind-the-scenes rock stars. They're the ones that make everything look good and sound good. So you obviously can't hear them or see them, but thanks a lot, guys. All right, so really excited for our second podcast. Hope everyone enjoyed the first one. We had some really great feedback from citizens and listeners. I even had my 22-year-old daughter, Savannah, listen to it. Shout out to Savannah. And she really liked it. She's a podcast junkie, and she gave me some great feedback and said it went really well. Great feedback amongst the people in our department. The only thing I kind of have to talk about is at Highlands Ranch Parade last week for 4th of July, I had one of our sergeants that stopped me and said, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. It was really good. But the only thing is that the banter between you and Lauren's our other PIO, she couldn't be here with us today, it said it reminded her of a old SNL skit." Well, I can't really talk about the skit on air, but if you look back and you listen, you might recognize it. So, Sergeant Christine Bright, let me tell you, I will try to do a little bit better and make it a little bit more exciting this go around. Anyway, so why are we here today? We're going to tackle the myths and truths about traffic enforcement and talk about some traffic issues in general. We've got some really good questions that our listeners have put forth, and we're going to answer those. We're also going to flip over to the humorous side of traffic and tell some stories and talk about some of the excuses that people have given us over the years to get out of a traffic ticket, but also to explain why they are speeding or doing some of the things that they're doing. I am super excited today to have one of my really good friends, Lieutenant Chris Washburn, with us today. You may recognize the name. He has done a lot of interviews in regards to the I-25 GAP project, which has been in the news a lot lately in the last year. He is my go-to guy with the media when I need to talk about someone to talk about traffic issues. He's definitely an expert. Well, Lieutenant, before we get going about traffic issues, just tell me a little bit about yourself and explain to the listeners who you are and what you've been doing for the last several years.
Sure. Thanks, Coach. Thanks for having me here. This is kind of a new experience for me, but I'm looking forward to it and getting a good message out.
Yeah,
I think it'll be good.
I think so too. It'll be
fun.
good.
I came to Douglas County back in 1997 when Douglas County was exploding. It was the fastest growing county in the nation, and sorry about my watch there. So anyway, I came over here and we were starting a traffic unit. I was one of the first guys to start a traffic unit with Douglas County. Worked some DUI enforcement, motorcycle patrols, all that kind of stuff. Promoted, made sergeant, and then moved around. I worked internal affairs, worked in the jail, worked patrol. I've worked a bunch of different areas, but through all of that, my passion and my place where I feel most comfortable and feel like I'm doing the most good is with traffic enforcement.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're definitely the one we think about when we have traffic-related issues or questions. No matter where you are or where you promote to, I think everyone resorts back to your knowledge for sure.
Well, thanks. I feel strongly that the guys out there doing the traffic enforcement, they're really saving lives every day.
Absolutely.
Of course, nobody wants to meet us when we're out there. Nobody wants to get a ticket from us, but really, if we can correct their behavior and make them a better driver, then less people are getting hurt, less people are dying, less properties being damaged. I think it's all very good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, for today's podcast, we're really going to get into the meat of some of the traffic issues that our citizens really wonder about. Any of our patrol officers out there, when they're doing traffic enforcement, they're always asked questions or they're given excuses or whatever. But I think it's really important for our listeners and our citizens to understand how Douglas County tackles traffic enforcement, because as far as I know, it's probably one of our biggest complaints, don't you think?
It absolutely is. Any of the HOA meetings that I go to, any of the community meetings that I go to, that any of our commanders go to, the number one thing that they get complained about is traffic in the neighborhood.
We hear it a lot too.
It's huge.
Yeah, in the public information office, and I know that the community resource guys hear about it as well. So let's get into it. Let's talk about traffic.
Sure.
So what does the sheriff's office do? How do we tackle traffic issues?
Well, there's a couple of things that we do. For like your neighborhood complaints, there's a car that's always speeding by my house, or there's a perception that we might have some excessive speed in a neighborhood. We have what we call a target list, and so those types of complaints get put on our target list. Our policy says that we have to go work that area a certain number of times for about an hour, and if there is a problem, then we can extend it and we can help solve the problem. Right. If it's a perception problem, then we'll meet with the person that was complaining and explain all of that. So we do targeted enforcement. The tip line, there's a public tip line that people can call in and leave us a message about traffic problems in their neighborhood.
And I think that tip line's on our website as well.
It is,
if people want to know that. That's great.
It is. But the thing that I'm most excited about the way that Douglas County is managing traffic right now is what we call STACK. And we use it for a bunch of different areas. And STACK stands for a strategic and tactical analysis of crime and crashes.
Okay.
So basically the way it works is all the stakeholders, all of the special teams within the sheriff's office, whether it's property crime investigators or traffic or resident deputies up in the Pike Forest, everybody gets together once a month and we talk about where we're having problems. We've got a crime analyst in the sheriff's office, and she crunches all the data and puts maps together for us and shows us where we're having particular problems, whether it's crashes or burglaries or car prowls or whatever it is. So then we look at where those trends are and how can we fix those trends. Traffic enforcement really lends itself to this type of an enforcement method. And what we've done over the last 5 years while we've been doing this program is we looked at where do the preponderance of the crashes happen in Douglas County.
Right.
And it's three main areas. It's on Highlands Ranch Parkway between Lucent and Broadway.
Okay. Yeah.
It's over around University and Colorado Boulevard, over to about Crest Hill where the high school is there, and then along Quebec Street. So we look at those areas and how can we solve the traffic problem there? And it's much more than just throwing cops at it to go write tickets. What we did is we established a meeting, and we meet right after the STACK meeting. I sit down with our traffic engineers, our public works department, all of the people that can look at where we're having crashes. Excuse me. And we look at it from all those different avenues. We're able to change timing on lights, or put in a new left turn lane, or redesign an intersection, all with the idea of reducing crashes in that area.
Well, that's just why I'm thinking about that. So I think a lot of the citizens out there think that us traffic cops, or you traffic cops, are out there establishing the speed limits, establishing the lights and stuff like that. It's not just you. Who do you work with to establish that?
No, and law enforcement really has very, very little say in establishing speed limits. All of the speed limits and all of the markings and the signs and all of that are all set by national standards. It's the model of uniform traffic control devices. It's a big book, probably 6 inches thick.
Oh, wow.
So our engineers and our planners make all of their decisions based on the cross traffic, the grade, the curves, all the layout of the road, and then in accordance with that Bible of traffic control, that's how they make their decisions for speed limits. Now we can have some influence. For instance, on Quebec Street, the speed was at 45 miles an hour, but we figured out that there was a sight distance problem coming from one intersection. Went to our engineers, talked to them about it, showed them how we were having too many crashes in that intersection, and we reduced the speed limit down to 40 instead of 45. Ended up reducing the number of crashes that we were having there.
That's phenomenal. So it's not just you guys out there just
not
putting up a speed limit and just however you want to. There's a lot that goes into it, obviously.
There's a ton that goes into it. And in fact, the work that we're doing with STAC has gained attention from law enforcement around the region and around the country. I sit on a couple of different traffic safety boards, and one's at the federal level, and the stuff that we do in Douglas County is starting to be implemented in other jurisdictions across the nation because it works. For instance, the last couple of years, if you look at the statistics across the United States, crashes were up anywhere between 20 and 40% across the country. But in Douglas County, Colorado, we were able to keep crashes on a downturn. Even though there's more people living here, there's more miles being driven, we were able to reduce the number of crashes as much as 11% one year.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And you think that has a lot to do with the STAC project as well as the teams that you've established?
Absolutely. It's that partnership that we have.
Well, and I think that's great. And I think that's what the citizens they don't see maybe on a daily basis is the things we do, outside of just running traffic or stopping people. It's the hours and hours of, planning that goes into these things.
For sure. People are probably familiar with the GAP project south of Castle Rock. And when we were in the planning stages of that, obviously it affects us. It's a state highway, but it affects the sheriff's office. So I was involved in that. And we brought a lot of things to play straight from our STAC concepts that we use before they even broke ground on the GAP construction project, trying to establish a safe work zone and a smooth place for drivers to operate.
That's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's a thing that comes to mind, the GAP project. I know that there's been a lot of controversy about it in the news, or maybe not controversy, but just a lot of issues that people have talked about. And I know there's been quite a few crashes there. I don't know if this is a good segue into, talking about traffic crashes and the move over law.
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Move over law was created. Well, it was upgraded, I guess, for Trooper Cody Donahue, who was a state trooper that was hit and killed on the side of the road south of town.
Just a couple of years ago, right?
Just a couple of years ago. And my group actually investigated all of that crash. So we had a lot, kind of personal interest in that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the move over law requires that drivers yield a lane. They pull over one lane if there's a stopped emergency vehicle or a stopped service vehicle. It doesn't matter if the stopped flashing lights are on the right side or the left side. Drivers are required to yield one lane and move over a lane. If it's impossible for them to do that, because we've all driven in rush hour and there are times where it's just not possible to move over, then the law requires that the drivers make a substantial reduction in their speed. So if you're driving on a 65-mile-an-hour roadway, a substantial reduction in speed, in most of our opinion, is a 20-mile-an-hour reduction in speed. So you need to be passing by at about 45.
Yeah. What do you see when you're out there? I know you patrol out there a lot on your motorcycle and your patrol car. Have you seen people adhere to it, or what do you think?
I think it's gotten better. We've done a couple of team operations with State Patrol and with other agencies and gone out. Initially, a couple of years ago, right after Cody was killed, there was a huge push, and every month we would go out and get people to understand the move over law. It started out with just warnings. We just wanted to educate the public.
Right.
Hey, there's this law. You need to be aware of it. It's the same as a careless driving ticket. It's a substantial ticket. You need to move over. And so we did about a week of that. And then we moved into doing some stricter enforcement and writing some tickets. And since then, It still happens.
Right.
It still happens that people don't yield to us and don't give us space, but it's much less frequent, much less.
That's great. I mean, it's something that, when I drive my personal car, and, if I have my children in the car, I always make sure I tell them, because they're all driving age, so they need to understand the importance of it. So
for sure.
So obviously it sounds like we've got some great things going on in Douglas County in relation to traffic issues and what we're doing to combat it. I think that a lot of us, in the public information as well as community resource, get a lot of different questions from the public, just general traffic questions. I mean, I think the biggest one is that, old age, or that age-old question, quite a hot topic right now, with one particular citizen, is, do we have traffic ticket quotas?
Sure.
Because I even got it a long time ago when I was on the road.
As long as I've been a cop, people have always asked me, so you're just writing me this ticket because you got to meet your quota. And the fact of the matter is, we don't have any quotas. There's no such thing as a ticket quota for Douglas County Sheriff. We want to educate our public. Ideally, we want to gain their voluntary compliance. We want people to be good drivers and not drive dangerously and cause crashes. In fact, we write more warnings to drivers than we write tickets to drivers. About 54% warnings.
So obviously more warnings than tickets.
Yeah. So typically we're out there just trying to educate people. It's not a matter of trying to punish somebody by writing them a ticket. But our job as traffic enforcement is to enforce those laws. And if you break the law, if you break the rules, there's repercussions or penalties for that. Those are all set by the state legislature. They're built into the revised statutes. I hear it sometimes from drivers. Well, can't you just reduce the fine a little bit? I have no control over the fine.
It's set,
not set by me.
Well, speaking of money, that's a good topic. I think a lot of people think when they get a traffic ticket that, or we're writing tickets, we're just trying to, increase our budget or increase our account or whatever. So, really, where does that money go?
Sure. We write tickets. Really 3 different places. We can write them into the City of Castle Pines Municipal Court. If the violation happens in the City of Castle Pines, we're under contract with them to provide their law enforcement. So we can write tickets into Castle Pines Court. We can also write tickets into County Court for minor traffic violations, speeding and seatbelts and that sort of stuff. And then the more egregious violations, DUI and reckless driving and that sort of thing, those go into the state court. So all of those fines are all set by whatever government entity, whether it's through the county model traffic code or through the state Colorado revised statutes. All those fines are all set. We don't control that. When a violator pays their fine, that money goes into the general fund. So if it's a county speeding ticket, that money goes into the county's general fund, which is all of the money to run road and bridge and department or the county health department.
So anything within the county, the
clerk
money,
and recorder, everybody gets a piece of that money. It doesn't come. It's not
just
like
not to law enforcement.
It's not like I'm writing a ticket and for $100 and $90 comes back to the sheriff's office. We might get 9 cents off of that.
Right. And I think too, a lot of those fines will go to real special causes as well, like victims. Victim type funds, like the brain injury. There's some other ones like that as well. Sure,
the courts have built in surcharges onto the fines.
Surcharges, okay.
And that's those are set by the chief judge for our judicial district. So there's a traumatic brain injury surcharge that gets added to speeding violations, and that money specifically goes to help people that have suffered a traumatic brain injury as a result of a car crash. There's a victim's assistance surcharge. Any violation from a seatbelt ticket to a third-degree assault, anybody that goes through the courts pays a victim's assistance surcharge as part of their fines.
Okay, so that's good to know, because I don't think people realize those the fees and the fines and the charges and things like that. They don't always just go to law enforcement. It's spread
correct
widely.
And all of our deputies are pretty well versed in all of that and can explain that.
That's good.
If they're getting a ticket, just ask.
Just ask them.
What's this money about?
Exactly.
And we'll explain it.
Oh, that's good. I'm kind of switching gears a little bit. going back to traffic accidents, and it's something that we get a lot, is what are the reporting requirements when someone's in an accident?
Sure. If it's one of those times where we're on accident alert, which frequently happens in the wintertime when the roads are bad, but it'll happen at other times. If call load has just got all of our staff just running ragged and we just can't get to them, there are a few other times that will go on accident alert. So we try to publish that. I'll put it out on my social media. We'll put it out through the department's social media. We'd get it on the radio, all that kind of stuff. In those cases, if you're in a minor accident, nobody's injured, nobody's under the influence of drugs or alcohol, you both have insurance, the state requires that you exchange information with one another, and then you make a report within 72 hours. And you can do that through our department website. There's a link, and you can just click
reporting.
on there and report it online.
I think I've seen that for sure.
So then you don't have to call law enforcement during accident alert. The rest of the time, if you're involved in a crash, state law requires that you move your crash out of the roadway. If the cars are at all drivable, even if they're all banged up, you have to move your car off to the side of the road.
That's good to know.
Which doesn't always happen.
Right.
And that just reduces the traffic queue. It makes it safer for the rest of the drivers that are out there. As soon as you can get your cars off to a safe place, then you need to notify law enforcement, whether it's in Douglas County, whether you're anywhere else in the state. You need to notify the local law enforcement. Just give us a call. We'll send an officer out, and we'll investigate the crash and what happened. You're required. State law requires that a crash is reported to law enforcement.
Okay.
It requires that drivers exchange information, and it requires that you remain at the scene of the crash if you're involved in a crash. If you fail to do any of those things, those are all significant violations. You can lose your driver's license for any of those. You can go to jail for those.
Yeah, because I think I've heard stories where people have just wanted to solve it amongst themselves because maybe they didn't want to get a traffic ticket.
Right.
But a lot of times insurance companies, and correct me if I'm wrong, they'll look for a crash report from law enforcement.
Almost every time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just good to let the public know that it's just better to call law enforcement and have them come out and do whatever needs to be done so you don't get in trouble down the line.
Exactly. Just give us a call, and if for some reason we can't respond to it, we'll communicate that to you and give you your options
and you might be able to
meet your requirements.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Kind of switching gears a little bit as well. I mean, sadly, on July 4th, we had a Parker resident who was on his bicycle that was hit and killed in a hit and run accident, or hit and run crash, I should say. We're still looking for that vehicle, but Colorado is definitely full of bicycles and cars sharing the same space. Can you talk a little bit about the rules for cyclists and cars on the roadway, and what space has to be given for both? Sure,
it's pretty straightforward. If you're riding a bicycle, you have to ride as close to the right road edge as practical. So as close as you can get off to the edge. If there is a painted shoulder or a painted bike lane, then you need to be within that. Vehicles that are passing by you have to give you 3 feet of space to pass by you. And I see it. I live in kind of a rural part of the county, and it's gorgeous, and bicyclists love to ride down there. But there's no shoulders on the road. Right. So then cars come up behind the bicyclist, and the bicycle is going significantly slower than the cars. But the cars make a pass on a double yellow line. Well, that's a violation. You have to follow the bicyclist until it's safe to pass the bicyclist. And you can't crowd them. And if you're driving a diesel truck, you can't blow smoke at them. And all of those things are violations. Really, it's incumbent on the car drivers and the bicycle riders to both share the road. We've seen the sign share the road, and it's sometimes a little misconstrued.
Right.
The bikes have a duty there too. They need to stay to the right. Cars need to give them 3 feet of space.
Yeah, I think it's just a real hot topic all amongst Colorado because we have such beautiful roadways.
Sure.
That I think it's incumbent upon, like you said, share the roadway, be responsible, be respectful. Exactly. Kind of along the same side as motorcycles. We see a lot of those, and unfortunately, we've had some fatal crashes within the last few years on our roadways. What are some of the traffic laws for motorcycles that people may not know?
The biggest thing with
or should know maybe and should pay attention to?
Sure. The biggest thing is with all of those fatal crashes on motorcycles that have happened over the last 5 years, and I just did a recap of looking at all the factors that happen. Every single one of those, the motorcyclist was not wearing a helmet.
Wow.
Every single one of those fatalities. Now, Colorado does not have a helmet law. There's no requirement that motorcycle riders wear a helmet.
Okay.
There is a requirement that motorcycle riders have eye protection. You have to keep the bugs out of your eyes.
Well, that makes sense.
It's hard to ride a motorcycle if you can't see.
Yeah.
But even though there's no legal requirement to wear a helmet, my best advice to motorcycle riders is to put a helmet on.
Absolutely.
I ride a motorcycle for a living. I'm in charge of our motorcycle unit. And if you see us, we won't even move the motorcycle across the garage without putting a helmet on.
Right.
Always put your helmet on. It's like we preach at our kids putting their bicycle helmets on. Do the same thing. Wear those helmets.
And our guys it's probably in our policy that they have to wear their helmets as well, which is good. That's good.
Yeah.
Just like us having to wear seatbelts as well. So.
Exactly.
So let's move on to a couple different questions that we have gotten from some of our listeners, and then we'll kind of take a quick little 30-second break, and then we'll move on to some more humorous things. So
sure.
A couple different things we got on our Twitter feed as well as next door is AJ Sharp wanted to talk to our traffic guru here and wanted to talk about the reason for switching the flashing yellow turn arrows at large intersections. Seems like it might cause more accidents than it prevents. So why do we have those yellow flashing turn signals?
Well, they actually reduce the crashes. So when you come to a signalized intersection like that, there are a couple of different ways that the engineers can program the traffic signals. One is a permissive left turn, which means that when the light's green, the arrow is green, or there's not an arrow, and it allows everybody to travel. And if you're safe to make your left turn, then you can make your left turn. The other is a restrictive left turn, which brings up a red light or a red signal.
Right.
Allows all the straight through traffic to go, but you can't make the left turn. What we found over the years is that on those restrictive intersections, we have a high number of rear end collisions because drivers are in the left turn lane expecting to turn left, and they're paying attention to the cars that are going straight through next to them.
Right.
And they keep rolling, and they're distracted, and they run into the car in front of them. We also found that in high traffic volume areas, those permissive left turns, we were having a lot of T-bone crashes because drivers were either not seeing past the traffic queue in front of them, they were distracted for whatever reason, they would make the left turn and get T-bone. So through that MUTCD Bible that we talked about, and through some of the federal guidelines, they established the yellow flashing arrow.
Right.
We tried it on a couple of intersections, a couple of key intersections where we had a number of crashes on left turning movements. And as soon as we put those flashing left turn yellow arrows in, it immediately reduced the number of crashes.
Wow.
Immediately.
It's amazing that something small like that could do it.
It just catches a driver's attention, makes them think, oh, can I go? Should I pay attention? Yeah. It just gives them that much, just enough pause to where they do it when it's safe.
Especially with it being yellow, definitely. Well, kind of, you mentioned it just a little bit ago in your answer, but we had one particular guy ask a couple questions about distracted driving. In particular, I'm not sure if he was making a complaint. I'm not sure if really what his question was regarding, whether it's cops in general, but about cops seeing officers, deputies or police officers in their cars. He described it as distracted driving, but either being on their phone or working on their MDTs or mobile data terminals. What is it? I know we're trained, law enforcement go through a lot of training, driver's training, but can you address his question about, distracted drivers being cops?
Sure. The texting and driving law was changed last year, and it was the penalties were stiffened up quite a bit.
Good.
The wording in that law is such that it's against the law for you to do data entry if it causes you to drive your car carelessly.
Right.
So it's not 100% against the law to text and drive.
Okay.
it's not bright. It's not a smart thing to do.
Right.
Law enforcement is specifically exempted from the data entry and driving because so much of our information for the call that we're going to,
right.
so much of checking to see if that car in front of us is stolen, so much of that has to be done through the computer that law enforcement is specifically exempted from that. Just like law enforcement is exempted from seatbelt use. Now, the sheriff's office has specific policies to address seatbelt use.
Right.
We have to wear them if we're driving our car. We have specific policies about texting and driving and talking on the phone and driving. All of the cars have got hands-free capability now, so that you don't have to.
So much easier, yeah.
Exactly. And specific policies to address using your MDT. We review every single accident that we're involved in is reviewed through our professional standards, through our internal affairs, and a decision is made whether that crash was preventable or not. I would say 95% of the crashes that we look at are probably preventable. The ones that are not preventable are where somebody else ran a red light or a deer jumped out in front of them, something like that. And if that's the case, then those deputies are either disciplined or receive remedial training to correct those issues. So we address it through policy.
Good.
That it's not okay to drive distracted. We address that through policy.
And I think a lot of the training we do every year, I mean, in-service driver training, I'm getting ready to go here in a couple of days, and I know Sergeant Miller, he just went and he talked about one of the things that they do is have you drive through a specific obstacle course, trying to put together like a puzzle, trying to...
Right. I just did that.
Oh, you did? Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty fascinating, and I'm looking forward to it. But I think the citizens out there just need to know that we have extra training. If unfortunately, there may be an incident where you think an officer is driving recklessly or you're not really quite sure, you're always welcome to call and talk to a supervisor, but do know that there's many reasons why law enforcement officers are out there driving fast or trying to get to an accident scene, get to a crime in progress.
Certainly.
And one of our last questions that we're going to talk about before we go to a quick 30-second break is one of the citizens, John from Veniford Point, wanted to know why the DCSO or other Douglas County government entity can't provide recorded video from eyeball cameras to document auto accidents at major intersections like Broadway and Highlands Ranch Parkway.
So a lot of the cameras that the public sees, the white ones that are on the signal arm, they look like kind of like a microphone or something.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Those are for the signals. The traffic signals at all of our intersections are all very smart technology, and that camera is what helps determine how the lights are going to cycle and how the lights are going to change. There's algorithms built in. Because we live in a snowy climate, the metal ground loops fail. They get hot and cold and they break, and it doesn't pick up
Doesn't
the cars.
work on the pressure, yeah.
So that's what those white cameras are. Those are not recorded because those are just part of the signal. Now, some of the other intersections, and you can get on the CDOT website and look at CDOT cameras, and you can look up traffic cameras. None of those are recorded. It doesn't matter whether it's CDOT or Douglas County Sheriff or Castle Rock Police or Parker Police or Lone Tree. Nobody records those simply because it would cost billions of dollars to store the video, and billions with the B. There's terabytes of data that are recorded every single day off of those cameras, and you can't store that much video. It's just way too cost prohibitive to do that. None of them are recorded.
Okay, so what's the point of them then? Is it just to watch traffic flow and if there's an issue in an intersection?
It is. All of those cameras are for traffic incident management.
Oh, okay.
And we could spend a whole podcast talking about traffic incident management.
Sure.
And basically, it helps us quickly clear crashes because we can't get run over and hurt if we're not out there.
Right.
So the quicker we can get things cleaned up and off the road, the better. And so those cameras are used hugely for that. They're also directly linked to the news, so that when you're drinking your coffee in the morning, you're watching the news, you can see that there's a traffic backup. Maybe you need to leave 10 minutes earlier so you're not having some road rage issues while you're trying to get your way to work. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, all right, we're going to take a quick little break for a crime prevention tip, and then we are going to kind of lighten up the topic and talk about some good excuses we've heard while we've stopped people on the road.
Hello, it's Sergeant Jeff Miller, and it's time for the Crime Prevention Dirty 30. It is 30 seconds of tips for protecting yourself from those dirty criminals. In 2018, there were 21,324 vehicles stolen in Colorado. That is 58 per day. Up to 50% of those are preventable. Here are some tips to help you keep your car. Never leave your car running unattended. Lock your doors every single time. Always park in well-lit areas. Don't keep a spare set of keys inside the car. Keep gifts and all valuables hidden from view. Buy comprehensive insurance that covers stolen cars. Report suspicious activities to a non-emergency police line. And that is this episode's Dirty 30.
All right, welcome back. That was a pretty good Dirty 30 crime prevention tip. I like that. Good job, Jeff. All right, so we're going to lighten the topic a little bit when we talk about traffic issues. I mean, it's one of those things that I think traffic in general stresses people out, the concept of getting a traffic ticket. But it's one of those things that I think all of us here at the Sheriff's Office really think it's important to get out there and educate the public and enforce the traffic laws. But I think so many of us have some stories that we can think back to in our traffic days, our patrol days. It's been a long time since I've worked patrol, but Chris, tell us some of the best excuses you've heard of, or like things that people have told you of why they were speeding or why they were doing the things that they did. Share some of those with the citizens or the listeners.
Sure, I've got so many poop stories.
Poop stories?
Poop stories. Poop always comes up when we're doing traffic stuff. That's why I was going so fast. You get the idea. It's probably not details that we need to put on a podcast,
Yeah, probably
right?
not. But if someone was resorting to that, they either really have to go or they really don't want a ticket.
I think that's probably the case.
But the question
really
is, so do you listen to it? Do you feel sorry for him, or do you just write the ticket faster?
Sure. I'll listen to him. I'll try to be as understanding as I possibly can. But at the end of the day, I still have a job to do.
Absolutely.
And I always try to be friendly, and I'll hurry along for him. I don't want to hold him up too long. One of the most memorable kind of funny traffic tickets that I ever wrote. I was pretty new on the motor unit, and I pulled a car over up in Lone Tree. The lady rolled the window down about 2 inches, stuck her driver's license, registration, and insurance out through the crack in the window.
Oh.
And just kept talking on her phone. Didn't say a word to me. I didn't say a word to her. I just took all of her paperwork, went back to my motorcycle, wrote up the ticket. When I go back to the car to give her a ticket, she's still talking on the telephone. So I folded it all up neatly, put it under the windshield wiper, went back to my motorcycle and left. Never said a word to her. She paid the ticket too.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
It makes you wonder, is she used to getting pulled over and she just figured there's no excuse, I might as well just take it?
Had to have been. I don't know. There was another lady. She was driving down Quebec Street. She's got a car full of teenage kids in there. And she was pretty animated with all the Starbucks that she'd been drinking that day, or all the caffeine that she had in her system. And she's just talking about trying to be a safe driver and not a distracted driver. And she's talking to her kids, and her kids related this story to me when I was investigating the crash. And she's just talking to the kids and doesn't see that cars are stopped in front of her.
Oh, no.
She's preaching to them about driving distracted and ran right into the back of the car that was in front of her. The kids were, I have never seen teenage kids laugh at their mom.
Oh, my gosh. I'm
kids.
sure she was embarrassed and mad at the same time.
She was mortified.
That's funny.
It was terrible. What about you?
Well, kind of speaking on that same terms, I was talking to one of our corporals, Brian Briggs, and he was relating a story that he had stopped a lady for speeding, and she was in a hurry because she had to get her son's insurance card to him because he had gotten pulled over and he didn't have a current insurance card with him. Well, when Corporal Briggs asked for her current insurance card, she didn't have hers with her as well. So she cried quite a bit and she was totally embarrassed. And he did a good job. He talked her through it, and he didn't end up giving her a ticket. But he related quite a few of those stories, and he mentioned a few poop stories as well. So it seems, unfortunately, like a common theme. Kind of a couple. It's been a long time since I worked patrol. It was in the 90s, and so definitely the traffic is not as busy then as it was now. But one of the things that I can think of, and actually talking to a few other people, they had similar scenarios. But I was just floored that someone could use this excuse. I stopped this couple, and I asked them why they were speeding, and the husband relayed to that his wife, who was in the passenger seat, was having a medical issue. I'm not sure. He said that she had a baby recently, and there were some medical issues, and I kind of got a weird vibe from him, like it wasn't accurate because some of the things they were talking about, didn't make sense. So I simply just said, all right, you know what? I'm calling an ambulance right now. We're going to get you to the hospital, get you all fixed up. Just make sure you have your insurance with you to cover the cost of the ambulance.
Right.
And all of a sudden, magically, they had no more medical issues.
Yeah, she was all good then.
Yeah,
right?
she was all good to go. And I always resort back to, if you don't want to get a ticket or you don't want to be stopped, just don't speed.
That's it. Be responsible and be. Really, when we're out there driving, we enter into a social contract with everybody else that's on the road. I have an expectation when I'm driving in my personal car that the drivers around me are going to do it in a safe manner and not run into me.
Yeah.
But I have an obligation to do the same thing for them.
Right.
So remember that you kind of have that social contract with everybody that's on the road.
That's a good way to look
at it.
You need to be a good driver. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way. Some of the other things I can think about too when I was on patrol was several times I had stopped someone and they tried to use the excuse, I'm an attorney, I can't get a ticket. And I bet you can kind of guess whether I gave those people tickets or not.
Oh, yeah.
Most certainly I did.
Yeah,
Actually, one of the most memorable ones is I had pulled a lady over for speeding, and she was yelling at me. Calling me every name that you can think of.
Been there.
Yeah, so I wrote the ticket out, and there's a nice handy-dandy space on the back for notes. And so I simply wrote everything that she was saying to me. When I went up to have her sign it, I explained to her, too, on the back that the judge is going to see everything that she said. She never uttered another word after that. She was dumbfounded that the judge was going to see what she...
A little more polite.
Yeah, a little bit more polite there.
That's really kind of calmed down. We all have body cameras now. Everybody on patrol, everybody has a body camera now. And I noticed a drastic difference in the politeness of drivers.
Oh, wow.
They're much less aggressive. They're much... whether they like the contact or not, they're not as vocal about it anymore because they know we're recording.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what we didn't really talk about body cameras, but that's a good thing. I didn't, and that could be for another topic, obviously, the body cameras and some of the things that people say and do, maybe not even realizing they're being recorded. So that's a good thing to think about. People
Cops
out there.
do it too.
Yeah.
They do.
We won't talk about that right now.
No.
A couple other things that I thought were funny. One of I think actually it was our undersheriff that told us that she had relayed a story from someone she knew that stopped someone for speeding, a little bit older lady, and she was speeding quite fast. And when asked why she was speeding, she told the officer that she sneezed, and when she sneezed, her foot went on the gas pedal. And it was kind of like, well, how long were you sneezing for to be speeding that fast?
That's a big long sneeze.
Yeah, big long sneeze on that one. So,
right.
I do kind of have one of my own stories on when I got pulled over for speeding long time ago. It was probably 1993, and I was headed to a college class, and I didn't live in Douglas County, but I was driving my vehicle, and then my license plate had a particular personalized license plate on it, and I'll tell you what it said here in a minute. But I was speeding. It was like Evans and Santa Fe, and a motorcycle cop pulled me over, and I was late for class. And I didn't use an excuse. I did not tell him I worked for the sheriff's office. I knew I was speeding. I just gave him the stuff I needed to give him, made no excuse whatsoever. He comes back, and what he says to me is, just because your license plate says warp drive doesn't mean you can drive that way.
That's funny.
So I immediately went to school, took my college class, went and paid my ticket, and I think about that every single time when I drive.
Do you still have the plate?
Yep, we still have the plate. It's not on any of our cars right now, but but we still have it. So
I think I remember that on one of your cars.
Yeah, we've had it on there for a long time.
That's funny.
So. Anything else you can think about? There's so many stories out there.
Yeah, we could go on for days and days talking traffic safety and funny stories and
right.
But no, I'm glad that we have this avenue to get some information out to people.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good wrap up. So wrapping it up, give us some general thoughts that you want to finish up telling the public about when it comes to traffic and the realities of traffic out there, but also the realities of you traffic cops and the things that you guys are doing and what you want to leave with the public.
Sure. Ultimately, what we want is voluntary compliance from our drivers, that they're following all of the rules of the road, that they're living up to that social contract that they've entered into, and they're not running into one another. That's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid dead drivers, injured drivers, huge property damage. That's what we're trying to reduce. One aspect of that is strong traffic enforcement. We're paid by our public that we're taking care of and that we're serving. We're paid to enforce those traffic laws. And to enforce those laws, we have to write tickets. It's nothing personal. That's what our job is. It's nothing personal, but at the same time, every one of those deputies that's out there doing traffic enforcement are saving lives every day by doing that.
Absolutely. That's something that I don't think the public always thinks about, when they see a deputy out there or a first responder out there writing a ticket or stopping for an accident scene. I think, unfortunately, in the last few years, we've had at least 6 deaths related to traffic fatalities. So,
right.
So obviously, the move over law is something that we want everyone to remember all the time.
Always. The move over law doesn't just apply on the interstate; it applies on Highlands Ranch Parkway. It applies on.
Okay, I didn't know
applies
that.
on any road that you're on. If there's a lane available for you, you have to yield that lane to give whoever that is, whether it's a firefighter or a cop or a public works person. You wouldn't believe the number of tow truck drivers and public works people that are killed every single year because they get run over.
Yeah, we don't think about them as well. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Literally hundreds lose their lives every year because they're run over by cars. You have to give us room. It doesn't matter what we're doing on the side of the road. Right. Give us some space.
And I guess a good way to look at it is, those first responders, whether they're law enforcement first responders, EMS, or the tow truck drivers or the construction workers, they're out there doing something to save someone's life. Let's just give them a little bit extra room.
For sure. That'd be my big request.
Perfect.
Just give us some room to do our job.
Great. Yeah. Well, Lieutenant, thanks so much for coming on. I look forward to having you on future podcasts. And again, thanks for being my go-to guy when it comes to the media. And look for Lieutenant Washburn out there. He's working traffic all the time. He does a lot of interviews when it comes to traffic issues. So
sure, I'll chat with you anytime.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much for listening for the second episode. Look for future podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Great information on our website, dcsheriff.net. Thanks so much and see you guys soon.